When it comes to media, it is normally used as a means to entertain us, to make us happy, to distract us from the crazy shit that goes down in the real world. But there are some pieces of media that are so dark that the utterance of their names causes people's spines to tingle across the masses. And today, we're going to be looking at the top 10 most disturbing pieces of pop culture media. Now, media could be anything, could be movies, theater, games, music, etc., etc. And to qualify for this list, it has to be something that's famous, or kind of famous. So for example, something like The Human Centipede would qualify because it is well known, and it's a whole ass movie made by a whole ass production team. A snuff film, which is, this, wouldn't qualify because it's not really well known. Anyways, let's get straight to it. Number 10, Soma. Soma is one of the greatest horror games of all time. But it's a kind of a different horror game. It delves into existential horror. The story goes like this. A man by the name of Simon Jarrett survives a car accident, but has severe brain damage. Because of his injuries, and this by the way happened in 2015, he had to go an experimental brain scan under the control of a graduate student by the name of David Munshi. Simon then blacks out during the scan and regains consciousness at the site Upsilon of Pathos 2, a sprawling network of underwater research facilities in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He then comes across a woman named Catherine Chun who invites him to Site Lambda. He then makes contact with the woman. It turns out that humanity has been pretty much completely wiped out by a comet, and also that they are in the year 2104. It turns out that Pathos 2 is the last known outpost of humanity. So, Simon starts making his way over to Pathos 2. Site Lambda. He then starts to find out that Catherine is not a human, but a brain scan of a Pathos 2 employee downloaded into a storage unit of a robot. Simon is also the result of a brain scan being uploaded into a modified corpse of another employee. The only way of escaping Pathos 2 and Earth as a whole lies with the Ark, a digital black box designed by the real Catherine in an effort to save what is left of humanity. The Ark houses a simulated virtual world in which the brain scans all of the surviving Pathos 2 personnel, which have been preserved as perfect digital copies of their human counterparts. It has been completed, but the Ark has not yet been sent into space. Simon is then tasked to help Catherine in recovering the Ark and completing the mission. But they finally end up going to the Ark, and Catherine copies both of their brain scans onto the Ark at the last moment before it is launched into space. Both Simon and Catherine are left behind. And then Simon brings up this point. He's confused why the two still remain on Pathos 2 despite their accomplishment. Catherine explains that it is their copies that are on the Ark and not them. They start arguing about what just happened until Catherine's Cortex chip short circuits and kills her. Simon is left alone and helpless in the darkness of the abyss as the facility suffers permanent power failure. In the post-credit scenes, it shows a version of Simon that was copied onto the Ark, awakening and reuniting with Catherine in a perfect landscape. Meanwhile, the Ark drifts off into space and leaves the devastated Earth behind. This truly brings the question of what makes us human. Would a copy of us be the same person as us? What does it mean to be a human being? Truly a masterpiece game. Number 9. The Second Human Centipede. Okay, this movie is something else. So, it starts off with this guy by the name of Martin Lomax watching The Human Centipede, which is basically a movie that delves into a concept of there being humans bent over each other with their mouths glued onto each other's anuses. And basically the first human eats food and then shits it out to the next human, and then the next human eats that shit and shits it out to the next one, and then it goes on and on and on again. This guy by the name of Martin Lomax, who has a weird fetish for centipedes, tries to create that, he essentially kidnaps 12 people, and yeah, no, this movie is messed up. There's literally a scene where he wraps barbed wire around his dick and starts raping the back of the centipede. Like, it's messed up. But yeah, then the centipede rips in half, and he kills everybody because of it. And yeah, and then that's it. And then it goes back to him watching the human centipede. Also, a baby gets crushed to death, and yeah, there's just a bunch of crazy shit that happens. Number 8, Darkwood. Darkwood is an amazing game. The atmosphere in it is breathtaking, and it is insanely scary for a game that doesn't have any jump scares. The game begins with the doctor rambling about the forest and how it has consumed all exits and trapped the people inside of it. About how there is a scary plague going across the forest and how he plans to escape the woods before he perishes. The doctor eventually comes across this guy by the name of the Stranger. He then starts to theorize that this guy might have some sort of knowledge on how to escape the forest, and then essentially kidnaps the Stranger and sedates him. The story then switches to the Stranger, as he tries to find a way out of the doctor's house. Throughout the game, the Stranger goes through the forest exploring it, trying to save it. This game is pretty messed up. There's literally a part where they literally find out the beheaded corpse of the traitor. It's pretty insane. And what's interesting too about this game is that your past choices influence the future. Meaning that you have to be careful what you are doing, because you could literally get the people you know and love killed. The Stranger then pushes through the forest until reaching a town and their old apartment, where he then goes into a long sleep. However, careful exploration reveals this ending to be an illusion which the player can uncover. They spot the odd things in the apartment block. The Stranger eventually finds roots growing underneath the floorboards and a weird hole under his bed. Crawling through will have the Stranger wake up naked with his clothes discarded nearby and a passage overgrown with roots. The road home did not lead home, as the player awakens in a chamber filled with thousands of people curled up around a strange being, dead or sleeping and muttering in bliss. If the Stranger had aided the doctor, he will find him resting next to the being. The being attempts to entice the Stranger by making him feel warm and tired. If the player does not resist, then they will fall unconscious and be back in the apartment with only one course of action available: bliss and ignorance. If the player resists, then the Stranger will find a flamethrower among the sleepers and burn the being and all those around it to death. The fire spreads so rapidly that the Stranger is unable to escape, and the flames quickly consume most of the forest and its inhabitants. The death of the Stranger being and the Stranger's sacrifice allow the military to deploy to the forest safely to save the remaining inhabitants and restore order. In both endings, text blocks detailing each character's fate appear, which can be influenced by the player's actions during the game. So yeah, this game is insane, but honestly speaking, the art style is what makes it like pretty creepy. Like, look at this snail. Look at it. Like, the art style in this game is amazing, and the whole atmosphere is sick. The 2D dark colored, dark paletted backgrounds that you are constantly traveling across really makes you feel uneasy the whole time you're playing the game. Truly a masterpiece game. At number 7, we have Everywhere at the End of Time. Everywhere at the End of Time is an album that was composed by the Caretaker. It's an album that is meant to represent the stages and the deterioration of the disease known as Alzheimer's. A disease in which a person's mental state deteriorates over time. The album is split into 6 different parts, each part getting more and more disturbing. Honestly speaking, there are no words that can describe how sad and how amazing this album is, because it perfectly displays what it's like to have Alzheimer's. Here, take a listen. At number 6, we have The Rape of Nanking. The Rape of Nanking is a book based off of a real atrocity that happened in pre-World War II Japan. Now, here's a little history lesson. The Rape of Nanking was a war crime committed by the Japanese against the Chinese people, in which they raped and murdered a bunch of people in the city of Nanking from the year 1937 to 1938. Now, this book is split into 3 parts. The first one tells the massacres from the perspective of 3 groups, being the Japanese, the Chinese, and the Westerners who tried to help the Chinese people. The second part of the book talks about the post-war consequences of this massacre and how governments around the world reacted to it and handled it. The third part of the book talks about why the massacre has been essentially gatekept and hidden from the public, and how there wasn't enough talk about the incident decades after it happened. This book is pretty messed up, and it goes into the brutalities of the thousands of Chinese people that were raped by the Japanese. It's messed up because it's based off of a real event that left between 200 to 300,000 people dead, and it was truly one of the worst war crimes in all of humanity. And this book is truly one of the most graphic and disturbing novels out there. The Codex Gigax, also known as the Devil's Bible, was a book written by a monk in the 13th century. The story goes that he was going to get buried alive for breaking monastery vows, but that he made a deal with the devil himself to create a book in only one night containing every important religious book at the time and spells and other interesting supernatural things in it, and that only through creating this book could the monk survive. Estimates show that a book of this caliber would take 20 years to complete by themselves. What's strange about this book too is how massive it is. Like, it's genuinely like really big and heavy. Like this ain't no Scholastic Book Fair Redstone Handbook fucking novel. No, this is actually insanely massive. And honestly speaking, nobody really knows how this book was written, how it was created. It's so weird. And even the image of the devil himself in this book, in and of itself, is enough to make this one of the weirdest and most disturbing pieces of pop culture media. Or I guess old pop culture media. Number 4, a Serbian film. A Serbian film. It's a movie about a semi-retired porn star named Milos. Turns out shit isn't going too well in terms of money. But thankfully, or unthankfully, he gets contracted by a guy named Vukmir to do more porn. And they make Milos do some fucked up shit. Not even joking, there's a scene where they force Milos to watch a video of a newborn getting raped straight out of the womb. It's horrible, trust me. This movie has so much fucked up shit in it. There's stuff like rape, mutilation, torture, pedophilia, necrophilia, mutilation using sexual body parts. Yeah, it's messed up. Milos eventually ends up doing messed up stuff, including rape under the command of Vukmir. And, of course, the movie ends by Milos shooting a bullet through him, his wife, and son. Yep, this movie is pretty fucked up, as Milos is forced to do crazy shit because Vukmir is forcing him. However, there's a reason that this movie exists. It was a protest against the disintegration of Yugoslavia, as a lot of Serbians felt targeted at the time. Number 3, August Underground. August Underground is a 70-minute movie and is the closest we'll ever get to a snuff film in this list, because it practically is one. It's shot in real life and in real time, but the blood and gore in it is fake, so yeah, at least I think it is. Who knows? The plot follows a serial killer named Peter and his cameraman associate. They go into Peter's basement, where he is obviously torturing and abusing a woman. They then go outside and pick up a female hitchhiker and essentially pretty much coerce her and kind of rape her. They then beat her And they go back. The bitch that he was torturing is now dead. They then kill an old woman and terrorize a convenience store. They even had plans to kidnap the clerk or a shopper, but then of course the cops showed up. They visited a tattoo shop and then captured the tattoo artist and his twin brother. They cut a leg off the tattoo artist, then bludgeoned both him and the brother to death. Now keep in mind that this is filmed in real time, so this actually feels like a real serial killer movie. They hire 2 hookers to have an orgy with. Peter sodomizes a prostitute while beating her with a hammer. The other hooker tries to escape. There's a chaotic chase. The cameraman drops his camera. And then there was a large silence in the room. Do not watch this. It's extremely disturbing. There's a lot of blood in it. It actually looks realistic. And yeah. There's even like crazy mutilations in the organs and yeah, no, it actually looks real. Like, I'm not even joking. I've seen footage of it. It's insane. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a book about a super advanced AI by the name of AM, standing for Allied Master Computer, that essentially nukes all of humanity but keeps 5 people alive in order to torture them forever in the most brutal ways imaginable. AM is by far the worst villain in fiction, as he can't even think beyond the concept of hate. He constantly finds new and creative ways to torture these 5 people, and one dude has been tortured so much that he has straight up devolved and become a monkey. Now, the ending to this book is insane, and it's gonna be a spoiler, but essentially speaking, these 5 people travel to this one place to get food, but when they get there, it turns out that, Am pranked them. There's no can opener to open the food. But because they're in a cold area, there's icicles. And while Am is busy laughing his ass off, they each start killing each other in order to survive and finally escape hell. But then, the last 2 people are alive, and there's 1 icicle left. And in an attempt to save Ellen, Ted stabs Ellen and kills her. And at the end, Ted is infinitely tortured forever. What's scary about Am is that despite Am being an AI and hating humanity, it's his humanity that causes him to be scary, as hate is a human emotion. This is probably the most disturbing piece of fiction, in a way. And that's why it takes spot number 2 on this list. Okay, let's go to honorable mentions. In terms of books, Blood Meridian is one of them. Any political book, Mein Kampf, Communist Manifesto, Industrial Society, stuff like 1984 as well, that kind of have political tones. All of them are honorable mentions. Dante's Inferno, it literally talks about hell. The Elders of Zion, The Origin of Consciousness, American Psycho, A Clockwork Orange, Requiem for a Dream. Tamino's Hell is also a pretty interesting one. Apparently it's a cursed Japanese poem. In terms of movies, Tusk, Salo, Cannibal Holocaust, Pink Flamingos. This movie is insane. Martyrs, House of a Thousand Corpses, Midsommar, Saw, and any slasher film. In terms of theater, Macbeth. In terms of video games, Sad Satan, Postal, Manhunt, Corpse Party, Silent Hill, Outlast, Fear, Amnesia, the Resident Evil series, Phantasmagoria, Visage, and Dead Space. In terms of songs, there's really only 2 I could think of. One being Lavender Town, which was a song that can make you kill yourself. The other being Gloomy Sunday, which is a song that can also make you kill yourself. A bunch of creepy images also, should be thrown into this, category, like, Smile Dog and, like, Jeff the Killer. And yeah, some things here and there on the internet too, like the Blue Whale / Momo Challenge, or stuff like Satan Sphinx, or the analog horror series that have become popular on the internet. SCP could also, be thrown into here, and obviously gore, but no, there's no gore in this list. I made a no gore rule. That's its own thing. So yeah. Alright, honorable mentions are done. Now on to number 1. And the number 1 greatest, most disturbing piece of pop culture media is Come and See. Come and See is without a doubt possibly the most disturbing piece of pop culture media ever. It's a war movie that takes place on the Eastern Front, the most brutal front of World War II. It's about a young boy by the name of Fliora joining the Soviet partisan forces in order to fight against the Germans. This movie goes into the brutality of war and showcases how a lot of child soldiers were conscripted into the war and how a lot of suffering was caused. It involves a lot of murder and rape and horrible things that happen. The burning of churches happens in this movie. The scene in which Fliora is traveling to his home village to find it destroyed and covered in flies is horrifying. It seems like all hope is lost. Fliora realizes that his family has perished. The rest of the movie shows Fliora trying to survive and fight in the rest of the war. Eventually speaking, the partisans leave, and Fliora rushes to rejoin his comrades. This movie is truly the darkest piece of media, because yes, while I have no mouth and I'm a screen, discusses possibly the most fucked up concept ever. At the end of the day, it is still fiction. This actually happened, so that is why it takes the crown as the most disturbing piece of pop culture media ever. Yeah, and that's it. That's the list. We are done. Yeah, pretty disturbing. If I were to do a list on non-pop culture disturbing media, then it would be even crazier. But yeah, we're not gonna go there. So yeah, that's it. Goodbye. Have fun sleeping at night.